The trauma you carry isn't just a wound. It's a doorway you've been too afraid to walk through. Most people spend their entire lives running from their pain, building elaborate fortresses of distraction, achievement, and false identities to avoid facing what broke them. They smile through gritted teeth, perform strength they don't feel, and wonder why the darkness keeps seeping through the cracks. But what if the very thing you're running from is the key to everything you've been searching for? What if your trauma isn't your enemy, but your most ruthless teacher? There was a man who understood this truth so deeply that it revolutionized how we see the human psyche. Not through academic theories or sterile research, but through his own descent into madness and back. Carl Jung didn't just study the mind. He mapped its darkest territories with his own sanity as the compass. In 1913, Jung stood at the edge of what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. He was 38, successful, respected, and falling apart. Visions haunted him. Dreams bled into his waking hours. The rational psychiatrist found himself drowning in the very waters he'd spent years trying to chart. Most would have called it a breakdown. Jung called it his initiation. He understood something that modern psychology still struggles to grasp. Trauma isn't just something that happens to you. It's a fracture in the soul that splits you into pieces, the person you show the world, and the person you hide even from yourself. The conscious mind builds its careful narratives, its explanations and excuses. Meanwhile, in the depths, the unconscious holds everything you couldn't bear to face. Every rejection, every abandonment, every moment you were too small, too weak, too human to handle what life threw at you. And here's where it gets interesting. Jung discovered that this split isn't a bug in the human system. It's a feature. The psyche fractures to protect itself, yes, but in that fracture lies the seed of transformation. The wound becomes a womb. The break becomes a breakthrough, but only if you're willing to descend into the very darkness you've spent your life avoiding. And that descent? That's where we're going now. Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." But choosing requires something most people will never do. Looking directly at what happened to you without flinching, without turning it into a story that makes you either the hero or the victim. Think about your own wounds for a moment, not the surface cuts, the deep ones, the betrayal that taught you not to trust, the abandonment that whispered you weren't worth staying for, the failure that confirmed your deepest fear about who you really are. These experiences didn't just hurt you, they shaped you. They became the invisible architects of your personality, building walls where there should be doors, creating masks where there should be mirrors. Jung called this the shadow, not just the dark parts of ourselves, but the parts we've exiled. The anger we're not allowed to feel, the vulnerability we've armored against, the dreams we buried because they were too dangerous, too real, too much for the world we learned to navigate. Every trauma creates shadow. Every wound deepens it. And most people die without ever meeting this hidden self. But here's what Jung discovered in his own descent. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's your lost potential. Every quality you've repressed, every emotion you've numbed, every part of yourself you've rejected, they don't disappear. They go underground, growing stronger in the dark, influencing your choices from the shadows. You think you're making rational decisions, but you're dancing to music only your unconscious can hear. The modern world makes this worse. We're taught to move on, to let go, to think positive. We medicate the symptoms and ignore the cause. We build successful lives on foundations of unprocessed pain and wonder why success feels so empty. We achieve everything we thought we wanted and still feel like strangers to ourselves. Jung saw this clearly. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Every pattern you can't break, every relationship that echoes the past, every self-sabotage that arrives right on schedule. This isn't bad luck or personal weakness. This is your unconscious mind trying to complete an incomplete story, to heal a wound by recreating it, hoping this time will be different. But it never is, because healing doesn't come from repetition. It comes from recognition, and recognition requires dissent. Jung developed a process he called active imagination, a deliberate dialogue with the unconscious. Not meditation that seeks emptiness, but confrontation that seeks wholeness. He would sit with his visions, his dreams, his darkest impulses, and instead of running or analyzing, he would engage. He painted mandalas. He carved stone. He built a tower with his own hands, each stone a symbol of something reclaimed from the shadow. This wasn't therapy as we know it. This was alchemy, the transformation of lead into gold, of wound into wisdom, of trauma into treasure. But the process is brutal. It requires you to feel what you've been numbing, to remember what you've been forgetting, to face what you've been fleeing. Most people would rather stay broken than risk this kind of breaking open. But for those who dare, something extraordinary happens. Jung called it individuation, not becoming perfect, but becoming whole. Not eliminating the darkness, but integrating it. The wounded healer emerges not despite the wounds, but because of them. This is the secret trauma doesn't want you to know. It's not stronger than you. It feels overwhelming because you're fighting it with half your psyche, while the other half is secretly allied with it. The conscious mind says, "I want to heal," while the unconscious whispers, "But healing means feeling, and feeling might kill us." Jung discovered that trauma's real power isn't in what happened. It's in the split it creates, the dissociation, the disconnection, the parts of yourself you've cut off to survive. But here's the revelation. Those exiled parts don't die. They wait. They wait for you to be strong enough, conscious enough, brave enough to call them home. This is why talk therapy often fails. You can't think your way out of a feeling problem. You can't logic your way through a soul wound. The mind that was present for the trauma literally cannot access the healing because it's the same mind that created the defenses. You need to go deeper. Past thought, past story, into the realm of symbol, image, dream, the native language of the unconscious. This is why Jung paid attention to synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that seem to appear when you're on the edge of transformation. The universe starts speaking when you start listening with more than your rational mind. The wounded healer archetype that Jung identified isn't about using your pain to help others, at least not at first. It's about recognizing that your wound is your initiation. In ancient cultures, shamans were often those who had survived illness, madness, or near-death experiences. Not because suffering makes you wise, but because surviving suffering consciously teaches you the path between worlds. Your trauma has already taken you to the underworld. The question is, will you find your way back with the treasure? Here's what this means for you, today, in this moment. That anxiety that won't let you rest? That's not weakness. It's your psyche trying to discharge energy trapped from an old threat. That depression that descends without warning? That's not failure. It's your system forcing you to slow down and feel what you've been running from. That pattern of relationship destruction? That's not bad luck. It's your unconscious trying to recreate the original wound so you can finally heal it. But healing doesn't look like what you think. It's not about forgetting. It's not about forgiving. It's not even about understanding. It's about integration. Taking the exiled parts of yourself and inviting them back to the table. The rage you've been suppressing might carry your power. The sadness you've been avoiding might carry your compassion. The fear you've been fighting might carry your wisdom. Jung knew this process was dangerous. Integration means giving up who you think you are for who you really are. It means sacrificing the ego's careful constructions on the altar of truth. Most people would rather keep their familiar pain than risk this kind of death and rebirth. But for those who take the journey, who descend into their own depths with courage and consciousness, something dies and something is born. Not a new person, but the person you always were beneath the adaptations, the defenses, the carefully constructed false self that trauma created. You discover that you are not your trauma. You are what chose to survive it. You are what's strong enough to face it. You are what's capable of transforming it. This isn't positive thinking. This isn't spiritual bypassing. This is the hardest work a human being can do. The work of becoming whole in a world that profits from keeping you in pieces. Jung spent his life after his descent, helping others find their way through their own dark nights. He knew that each person's path would be different, that the symbols and synchronicities that guide one soul would be meaningless to another. But he also knew this: the only way out is through. The only way to heal is to feel. The only way to integrate is to stop running from what you've been running from your whole life. Your trauma wants you to believe that it defines you, that you'll always be the person who was hurt, abandoned, betrayed, broken. But Jung's greatest gift to humanity was this recognition: you are not what happened to you. You are what happens next. You are the whole consciousness that can hold both the wound and the healing, the darkness and the light, the death and the rebirth. The question isn't whether you have trauma. In this world, who doesn't? The question is whether you'll let it use you or whether you'll use it. Whether you'll remain its victim or become its alchemist. Whether you'll stay split or risk the terrible, beautiful work of becoming whole. Jung wrote near the end of his life, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But that privilege comes with a price: the willingness to meet everything you've hidden from yourself, to descend into your own depths without guarantee of return, to trust that what breaks you open might be exactly what you need to finally, truly, deeply heal. Your trauma has already shown you the darkness. The question that remains is this: are you ready to find your light within it?